I never thought I'd see my own name carved in stone. But there it was, gold letters gleaming through the rain. Thaddeus Crowe, 1969 to 2026. I stood 50 feet back, hidden behind a cheap beard and a coat that smelled like someone else's life. My funeral was perfect. I'd made sure of it. Every flower, every hymn, every calculated tear. But I wasn't here for the performance. I was here for the truth. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome. We tell stories that hit home. Stories about betrayal, power, and the things people do when they think no one's watching. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And hey, if you like what you're about to hear, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's get back to it. The priest droned on about legacy and loss. The mayor followed with numbers I knew were inflated. Applause broke out like this was a shareholder meeting. I watched them all. Hundreds of people who claimed they knew me. Most of them didn't. Some of them destroyed me. My jaw clenched beneath the fake hair. This was why I came. Then Merrick Vaughn stepped up to the microphone. 6 feet of tailored confidence. My best friend since Harvard, my COO, the man I trusted more than anyone. He wiped his eyes, perfectly timed, perfectly fake. Thaddeus was more than a friend, he said, voice cracking just enough. He was a brother, a visionary. But he trusted too easily. The words hit me like a fist. Merrick kept talking. Some of us warned him, tried to protect the company from his softness. The crowd nodded. They agreed. I felt my fingers curl inside my pockets. Softness. My sister Callista took the mic next. Black Chanel, perfect nails, empty smile. He left us early, she said, voice cutting like glass. Maybe he left unfinished business. He never listened, never cared how his choices affected family. Family. I stared at her hands, hands I'd paid to educate at Yale, hands that only reached out when they needed something. Then came Elowen, my wife. She wore black silk that moved like water. No tears, no tremor. Thaddeus was complicated, she said slowly. He loved deeply, but he built walls. He was married to his work more than he was married to me. She paused. Some people mistake control for love. The crowd murmured in agreement. Something snapped inside me. Not rage, not heartbreak. Clarity. I'd spent 6 months digging through their lies. Shell companies, offshore accounts, stolen millions. They thought I was soft. They thought I didn't know. They were wrong. Then someone I didn't expect stepped forward. Leora Finch, my former assistant. The organizers looked confused. Merrick's eyes narrowed. Elowen's lips pressed thin. But Leora took the microphone anyway. You all keep talking about who Thaddeus was to you, she said, voice shaking with fury. But none of you knew him when no one was watching. Silence fell across the cemetery like a blade. Leora didn't flinch. He paid hospital bills without names attached. Thousands of them, she continued. He rebuilt factories just to save jobs when closing them would have been cheaper. Her voice cracked. And he knew. He knew the people closest to him were lying, stealing, planning. Merrick went rigid. Elowen's mask slipped for half a second. Callista looked away. Thaddeus Crowe wasn't soft, Leora said, eyes blazing. He was observant and patient, and he saw all of you. She stepped down. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable now. Whispers started. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Someone had told the truth. 6 months earlier, I'd collapsed in my office. One moment, I was reviewing quarterly reports. The next, the ceiling was spinning and Leora was calling 911. The doctor said stress-induced, not fatal, recoverable. But lying in that hospital bed, hooked to machines, I realized something worse than death was waiting for me. Betrayal. During recovery, I worked from my study, but I wasn't building anymore. I was excavating, digging through years of archived emails, transaction records, encrypted files. What I found made my blood run cold. Shell companies registered in Delaware under my COO's mother's maiden name. Accounts drained slowly. $200,000 here, $150,000 there. Small enough to hide, large enough to total millions. Merrick. My brother in everything but blood. Then I found Callista's trail. Corporate secrets sold to competitors. Not for money, she had plenty. For leverage, for power, for the satisfaction of undermining the brother who'd always overshadowed her. Board meeting notes leaked days before critical votes. Product launches sabotaged. Acquisition targets warned. She'd been doing it for 3 years. Elawan was the most careful. Offshore accounts in her maiden name dating back 5 years. Real estate purchased through shell corporations in Monaco and Singapore. She'd been preparing for a divorce that would gut me financially while making it look like my fault. Affairs carefully documented. My controlling behavior recorded in a private journal. A lawyer already retained. She'd been building her exit strategy since our 10th anniversary. Different motivations, different methods, same destination. My destruction. I could have confronted them. Lawyers, injunctions, criminal charges, but that would have given them time to cover tracks, spin narratives, paint me as paranoid. So I did something else. Something they'd never see coming. I hired Bryn Holloway, an investigative journalist who'd exposed 3 senators and a Fortune 500 CEO. Then I staged my death, a carefully planned heart attack during a business trip to Vermont. August Pike, my head of security and the only person who knew the truth, handled the logistics. A paid coroner, weighted sandbags in a sealed coffin, DNA samples from old medical records to satisfy any questions. I disappeared into a safe house in rural New Hampshire, and I watched, waited, listened. 3 days after my funeral, they gathered at Whitmore and Associates. The law firm had served my family for 3 generations. Edmund Whitmore himself presided, 72 years old, silver-haired, unshakable. Except today, he looked uncomfortable. I watched through a camera August had installed in a wall clock. Merrick sat back, already calculating his take. Callista crossed her legs, patient as a viper. Elawan studied her nails. They were ready to divide the empire. Thaddeus Crowe left explicit instructions, Whitmore began. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. Crowe Meridian Holdings, valued at $3.2 billion, will not be inherited by family members. The temperature in the room dropped. Merrick's smile vanished. Callista uncrossed her legs. Elawan finally looked up. Instead, ownership transfers to a blind trust managed by an independent board, effective immediately. Merrick shot to his feet. That's impossible. I'm the COO. The company can't function without... The trust includes management transition provisions. Whitmore cut him off. Mr. Vaughn, you'll receive 30 days severance. Standard protocol. Panic flashed across Merrick's face. 30 days. Not the partnership he'd been promised. Not the shares he'd already spent in his mind. Nothing. This is insane, Callista hissed. Thaddeus wouldn't... There's more, Whitmore interrupted. He pressed a button on the table. The lights dimmed. A screen descended from the ceiling. And then I appeared. Alive. Sitting in the study they all recognized, wearing the Navy suit Elawan had bought me last Christmas, staring directly into the camera. If you're still watching, take a second and hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Hello? My recorded voice filled the room. I attended my own funeral. Elawan's face drained of color. Callista made a sound like a wounded animal. Merrick grabbed the edge of the table. I heard every word you said when you thought I couldn't hear. My voice was calm, almost gentle. Every lie, every betrayal dressed up as grief. On screen, I raised my hand. Don't bother explaining, the courts will handle that. The display changed. Documents flooded the screen. Email headers, bank statements, wire transfer receipts, photographs, timestamps matching business trips, board meetings, private dinners. 3 years of evidence. Systematic, comprehensive, irrefutable. Merrick's shell companies laid bare. Callista's leaked documents traced. Ilawan's offshore empire exposed. Financial fraud, corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit theft. I listed their crimes like reading a grocery list. All documented, all admissible, all waiting for federal prosecutors. The screen went dark for a moment, then my face returned. The truth doesn't die, I said quietly. It waits, and I waited with it. The screen went black. The lights came up. Whitmore closed his folder. Merrick was arrested 4 hours later. FBI agents walked into his Tribeca penthouse at 6 p.m. He was pouring scotch, still trying to process what happened. They read him his rights while his second wife watched from the hallway. Embezzlement, wire fraud, money laundering, $47 million over 6 years, bail set at $10 million. The accounts he would have used were already frozen. He spent the night in federal lockup. Callista's world collapsed within 24 hours. The board voted unanimously to remove her from all positions. Her trust fund, controlled by company bylaws, was suspended pending investigation. The competitors she'd fed information to deleted her contacts and issued public statements denying any relationship. Lawsuits arrived by courier every few hours. Civil, criminal, international. Her lawyer told her to expect 5 to 7 years minimum. She stopped answering her phone. Silas Crowe, my estranged father, had shown up at the will reading uninvited, demanding his rightful share as next of kin. He'd abandoned me at 14, reappeared when I made my first million, disappeared again when I refused to fund his schemes. Now he was back, hand out as always. The federal seizure of his offshore accounts hit 72 hours after my funeral. 20 years of tax evasion, money laundering through casino fronts. The statute of limitations expired in 6 months. I'd timed it perfectly. Ilawan was different. She hadn't committed crimes, just planned strategic devastation. I could have let her walk away, but I didn't. I met her one final time in our penthouse. 12 years of marriage contained in 4,000 square feet of glass and steel. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at Manhattan. Her reflection in the glass was ghostly, beautiful and hollow. I'd loved her once. Maybe she'd loved me too, in the beginning. "Did you ever love me?" I asked. The question hung in the air between us. She didn't turn around, didn't answer, just kept staring at the city lights like they held some answer I couldn't give her. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. I nodded to myself. "That's your answer," I said softly. I left the divorce papers on the entry table. The prenup I'd insisted on 12 years ago was ironclad. She'd signed it eagerly, young, confident she'd find other ways to access my wealth. Now it protected everything. No alimony, no property division, no settlement. She kept what she'd brought into the marriage and nothing more. Her lawyers tried for 3 months to break it. They failed. She moved to London 6 weeks later. I never saw her again. Bryn Holloway published her exposé 4 months after my funeral. 10,000 words in 3 major outlets simultaneously. The billionaire who faked his death to expose his family. It won the Polk Award. She donated the prize money to a fund for whistleblowers. The documentary rights sold for $2 million. She gave that away, too, to families who'd lost jobs when companies were gutted by corporate raiders. We never met in person after that first coffee shop. She sent updates. I read them all. Never replied. Crowe Meridian Holdings transitioned to employee ownership over 18 months. Every worker with more than 2 years of service received shares. Janitors who'd cleaned my office, assembly line workers who built our products, mid-level managers who'd kept things running. Administrative staff who'd answered phones and filed reports. 15,000 people suddenly had stake in their own future. Productivity jumped 38% in year one. Turnover dropped to nearly zero. The stock price doubled. Leora left corporate life entirely. She'd saved enough and wanted something different. She took a position teaching economics at a community college in western Massachusetts. 20 students per class. Most of them first-generation college. Many working 2 jobs while studying. She taught them what business school never did: how to spot corruption, how to protect themselves, how to build something ethical. The blind trust ensured her salary was comfortable. She never asked for it. I made sure it happened anyway. I disappeared completely. No interviews, no public statements. My name appeared only in footnotes of business journals and annual reports. The blind trust handled everything. I became a ghost in my own story. August helped me establish a new identity. Simple, clean, untraceable. Thomas Wright, retired accountant, widower. I moved to a coastal town in Maine where nobody recognized my face and nobody cared about billion-dollar empires. The town had 1,200 residents, 1 grocery store, 2 churches, a library that smelled like old paper and coffee. I rented a cottage 3 blocks from the water, paid cash for a used pickup truck, joined the local fishing club even though I'd never fished in my life. An old man named Dutch taught me how to tie flies and read the tide charts. He never asked about my past. I never offered. I visited Leora twice a year, always unannounced. She'd be grading papers or preparing lectures, and I'd knock on her office door. She never seemed surprised. We'd get coffee at the student union and talk about everything except the past, her students, my fishing trips, books we'd read, the weather. Normal things. It felt like breathing after holding your breath for years. One afternoon, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Do you regret it? We were walking across campus. Fall leaves covered the pathways in gold and red. I thought about it, really thought. No, I said finally. I regret trusting them. I regret not seeing it sooner. But exposing them? I shook my head. That's the only thing I don't regret. Take a minute and hit subscribe if you haven't already. We're almost at the end, and you'll want to catch the next story. August checked in monthly, encrypted calls from different numbers. He'd update me on legal proceedings. Merrick's trial was scheduled for next spring. Prosecutors were confident. $47 million was hard to explain away. Callista took a plea deal, 4 years, eligible for parole in 2. Her lawyer called it a victory. Silas fought extradition from the Bahamas for 8 months before giving up. Alawan never faced charges. She hadn't broken laws, just hearts. 2 years after my funeral, I drove to the cemetery. It was late October, the same kind of rain that had fallen the day they buried an empty coffin. My headstone was still there, granite and gold, permanent. Someone had been leaving flowers, fresh ones every week, white lilies. I never discovered who. Part of me didn't want to know. I knelt in the wet grass, placed my hand on the cold stone. You were right, I whispered. They told the truth when they thought you were dead. The rain kept falling. Somewhere in the distance, a car door closed. I stood, brushed off my knees. Looked at my name one last time. Thaddeus Crowe was dead. He'd died the moment he faked his death. The man who walked away from that grave was someone different. I drove back to Maine as the sun set. The truck's heater barely worked. The radio played old country songs I'd never listened to before. I stopped at a diner Dutch had recommended, ordered coffee and pie. The waitress called me Tom, asked how the fishing was. I told her about the striper I'd caught last week. She laughed and said Dutch had already told everyone in town. It felt real, more real than anything had felt in decades. Spring came to Maine slowly. Ice melted from the harbor in sheets. Lobster boats returned to the water. Dutch invited me to crew on his boat for opening day. We left the dock at 4 in the morning. The ocean was glass smooth and freezing. He showed me how to bait traps and read the GPS markers. We didn't talk much, didn't need to, By noon, we'd pulled 60 traps. My hands were raw and my back ached. I'd never felt better. That evening, the fishing club held a cookout. 40 people gathered at the marina. Picnic tables covered in newspaper. Mountains of steamed lobster and corn. Beer in coolers packed with ice. Dutch introduced me as Tom, the worst fisherman I ever trained. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. A woman named Caroline asked if I'd help with the library fundraiser next month. I said yes, without thinking. This was my life now. The library fundraiser was a book sale in the town square. I spent 3 Saturdays sorting donations. Caroline ran the operation like a military campaign. She'd been a logistics officer in the Navy. Retired here 10 years ago. Lost her husband to cancer 2 years back. We sorted books and talked about nothing important. She made me laugh. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Not performing, not calculating, just laughing. One Saturday, Caroline asked about my wedding ring. I still wore it. Habit, maybe, or reminder. Widower, I said. The lie came easily now. I'm sorry, she said. How long? Few years? Cancer. Another lie. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. It gets easier, she said. Not better, just easier. I believed her. August's calls became less frequent. Every 2 months, then quarterly. The legal machinery was grinding forward without me. Merrick's trial ended in conviction. 12 years federal prison. He'd be 70 when he got out. Callista served 18 months before parole. She moved to Portland and worked at a nonprofit. Kept her head down. August said she looked different. Smaller somehow. Quieter. 3 years after I became Thomas Wright, Bryn Holloway sent a final message. Not through August. Directly to a P.O. box only she knew about. A handwritten letter. The story's over, she wrote. Merrick's appeals failed. Callista's rebuilding quietly. Elowen remarried. A London banker, ironically. Crowe Meridian just posted record profits. Employee retention is 97%. You did it. She signed it simply. B. I burned the letter in my fireplace. Watched the paper curl and blacken. She was right. The story was over. That summer, Caroline and I started having dinner once a week. Nothing formal. She'd cook or I would. We'd eat on her porch or mine. Talk about town gossip, books, the ocean. She knew I was hiding something. Never pushed. One evening, watching the sunset over the water, she said, "Everyone's running from something, Tom." She looked at me. "What matters is what you're running toward." I didn't have an answer, but I was starting to find one. 4 years after my funeral, I returned to the cemetery one final time. The flowers had stopped appearing. Whoever had been leaving them had moved on. The gold letters on my headstone had dulled slightly, weather and time doing their work. I didn't kneel this time, just stood there, hands in my pockets. "I'm alive," I said to the stone. Not the declaration I'd made years ago, a different one. "I'm actually alive." I meant it this time. I stopped wearing the wedding ring that fall. Put it in a drawer with other things from another life. Caroline noticed but didn't comment. We took Dutch's boat out one crisp November morning, just the 2 of us. She'd learned to fish properly. Better than me already. We pulled traps in comfortable silence. The sun broke through the clouds, lit the water like diamonds. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said. I looked at her instead of the ocean. "Yes," I said. "It is." 5 years after attending my own funeral, I sat on my cottage porch. Spring again, the cycle continuing. Dutch had invited me to co-own his boat. Caroline and I were planning a trip to Nova Scotia. The library fundraiser had become an annual tradition I helped organize. People in town knew me, trusted me. I was Tom Wright, retired accountant, fisherman, friend. Thaddeus Crowe was a name on a stone 300 miles away. And I was finally, completely free. Sometimes the only way to know who loves you is to let them believe you're gone. But the real question isn't who loves you. It's who you become when you're no longer playing the part they expect. I'd been a billionaire, a husband, a brother, a friend. All masks worn for people who never saw beneath them. Now I was just a man with calloused hands and honest work. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who that man was. The truth doesn't die. It waits. I'd waited in disguise at my own funeral, waited through arrests and trials, waited through new identities and quiet years. But the waiting was over. What I'd found wasn't revenge or vindication. It was something simpler, something I'd never had when I was Thaddeus Crowe. Peace. The kind that comes from living a life that's actually yours. Not built on lies, not performed for cameras, just real. That's the end of this story. If it hit you the way it hit us, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and leave a comment telling us what you thought. We've got more stories coming that'll make you think, make you feel, and maybe make you question everything you thought you knew. Stay connected. We'll see you in the next one.